to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast. We are so excited to be ending 2022, and I hope that it was an amazing year for you. For some of you, it was. For some of you, it was crazy challenging with amazing opportunities on the other side. So what we love to do in December is look at, hey, how did our year go in multiple different ways? And how do we plan to move to the next thing in the next year? So we have a very special guest with us today. Jaime Taets is CEO of Keystone Group International. She's an author, speaker, and fellow podcast host. So Jaime, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Tracy. It's great to reconnect.
Yes, it absolutely is. And we have chatted quite a bit in the past about just some synergies between how do we transform people in our organization? What does that look like? How do we tie that into culture? And how do we create the systems so that that's easy?
Yeah, and that's what we do, right? That's what gets me out of bed every day is there's no one right way to do this. And companies need to be having these kind of conversations and creating the space in their organizations. We say space, it means the place, right? Where the leaders can come together and talk about where are our gaps, where are our strengths, right? What can we lean on? And so when we created our culture model, it was for that reason. How do we simplify it so that it's pieces that they can talk about and really action around versus it being this nebulous thing that we know we're supposed to care about, but we don't know what to do. And that's the feeling I think a lot of leaders have. How do we impact it? How do we move forward in this environment that we're in right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things that you just said that I want to kind of dig into. Mm-hmm. And one is when we talk about culture, so often culture is this squishy word that nobody has a definition to. So we define culture as the behaviors that you allow or don't allow over and over inside your organization. Yeah. How would you define culture?
So we have a definition of culture. We say a positive culture, right? Striving for a positive culture is a place where people leave every day better than when they came in.
I love it.
It's simple, yet not easy, right? Like totally understand that. But simplistically is, how are we bringing people in with the baggage, personal lives, and the world around them, and we're bringing them into our workplace and our work environment and filling them up all day long and sending them home in a better way? Now, that can be big things and it can be small things, but are organizations even paying attention? Coming from large corporate background, and I don't mean to make a joke of it, but I mean, those organizations feel more like, come in high energy, suck me dry all day. As a leader once joked with me, send me home to kick the dog and open the liquor cabinet, right? Like it's just, we're depleting people during the day. That's the piece that needs to change. And it could just be as simple as a really positive leadership discussion where someone really truly saw us, right? And wanted to help us with something. And that's the impact that leadership is the nucleus of all of this, right? Yeah. Being able to behave that way.
Absolutely. And I think one of those things that we're seeing in a lot of organizations and we've implemented in ours, so we've got a coaching arm of our business is one of our team members said, hey, Tracy, you do all this coaching. Why aren't you doing it with us? And I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Right. Shoemaker's children. Yep. Always.
Right. So we took our team meeting last week and spent 4 hours teaching them the coaching model that I use and coaching every single one of them on their thoughts. It has changed the behavior and how we're having conversations.
Okay. So anybody who's listening, if you are going to hire a company to help you, hire a company that does it themselves. To themselves. I mean, that is just like probably the highest level of consulting when you can say, we want to be just as good internally as we're telling everybody else they need to be.
Right.
And there are a lot of consultants that are smart people that wouldn't do what you just did, wouldn't take that time. And I just want to recognize you for it. That's a big deal. And I always say, never hire a coach that doesn't have a coach themselves.
Right.
Because they have to believe in coaching. And I believe everybody needs a coach.
Oh, I do too. I do too.
Everyone.
Because man,
life changing.
Yeah. It's like one of the coaches that I use and follow, she explains it as your mind is like a 2-year-old running around with a pair of scissors. Like if you do not manage your mind, it is going to hurt everybody, including themselves. So,
oh my gosh, that is so accurate for me.
so with that being said, when we look at culture, it's what is that? And I want to go back to the second thing that, I wanted to bring up from your opening comments. And that was, you said, manage the gaps. And managing the gaps is so often what I hear folks say is, well, what are the gaps? How do I know there's gaps and how do I manage them? And I'd love you to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I actually have a keynote that I speak nationally on called Bridging the Gap, right? Helping leaders and employees kind of bridge that gap. Because what we're seeing, I was just having this conversation last night with a CIO of a large organization at one of our events, was there's just a ton of factors that we could dig into and what's creating this gap. But on one side, we have organizations or leaders that want innovation, right? They want profitability. They want to reduce profit erosion, right? Ways that, especially with the current environment. And on the other side, you've got employees who want a sense of belonging and want to feel seen and valued, and they want development and coaching, right? Like what you're from their leaders. And then you got leaders on the other side that are burnt out and trying to keep their heads above water. And we both want the same thing, but we can't bridge that gap. And so it really starts with an honest conversation at multiple levels of the organization. And that's why we created the model that we created, is to give it to organizations and say, start having conversations, start talking about where you're strong and where you're weak, really vulnerably, and then put a plan in place, right? Go find the right consulting partners or advisors, as we call ourselves, because we're here to advise you and make you better, right? But you need an outside perspective. You're too close to it, right? So it's same with coaching, is the thoughts are yours already. You need someone to help you kind of pull you back and look at them, right, in a different way. Organizations need that same thing. Now, sometimes they can do that on their own and they can be very impartial, but it all starts with a conversation, right? I think we overcomplicate everything and we think it needs to be this fancy thing and it needs to be years in the making. It will take years to transform your culture, but it starts with one conversation and a leadership team saying, these are the 2 or 3 things we're going to work on this year. Because you're not going to solve it all. You didn't create this issue in a quarter or in a month, and you're not going to solve it in that amount of time. But you've got to figure out what that steady march, right? What that framework and that model is to keep you focused on it. Because if, God forbid, if there is a recession or things soften, right? Whatever that looks like, what's the first thing that's going to go? Culture.
Yep.
The focus on culture. Your culture will still be there. It might not be as great as you want it to be, but it's the first thing that you're going to take your eye off of, because we got to get more sales. Right? Or we've got to protect profits, or we got to, whatever it is. And so what we're constantly doing is saying the culture pieces aren't fluffy, fun team building. They're like built into your strategy that actually drive your business results. And the most successful of our clients have figured out how to do that, how to pull it in and not have it be this separate initiative.
Right. I love that. And what's so interesting is I was chatting with a client last night and we had done, 8 or 10 goal setting sessions. And we always tie it to mission, vision, values, et cetera. And more than half the folks in the room had never looked at their mission, vision, values. I'm like, they're on the wall. And they're like, yeah, right. And so when we went through that, so then we were going to go to the next kind of step and take them all the way through kind of some of those different processes. But the answer back was, well, guess what? HR is shared between 3 different plants, and we can't even hire individuals until February or March of next year because we're in a hiring freeze because of a fear of recession. And my answer back to them was, and what happens to your current people if you don't move forward with the leadership training? And if you don't move forward with those things, what is the culture you're creating within that? And her answer was, I know, but we don't have any choice. And I always want to challenge, I don't have a choice, because you're making a choice to not have a choice in a voice.
You are. And so yesterday, sitting right here in my office with one of our best clients, 3-4 years on a journey of strategy, leadership development, culture. I talk about them in my keynote. I write about them in our book. Like they truly, it's taken a long time, but they've stayed the course. We talked about 2023 planning, right? How can we support you in 2023? And I don't have my exact notes in front of me, but he said, we're really good. But he's like, good to great, right? We always want to be striving to do more. And he said, I think it's purpose this year, right? We have a purpose, right? And we talk about the why as a company and our values. And he goes, I want to go deeper. because he sees it's like, that's that next turn of the dial, right? They could just get them the lift that they want. And they're now addicted to that lift. That's what I would classify them as, right? They know, look at where we were and look at where we are. And if we keep doing this, imagine what we could be. But for organizations, you have to get to that point. It's that like chasm that you have to cross over. And then there's no turning back, because the flywheel will be moving in the right direction, but you have to see it as an investment that you cannot avoid. And the nice thing, Tracy, about the work we do is when you and I started, even 5-7 years ago, there was not the data that there is now.
Right.
Support the direct tie to leadership capabilities, to culture, to your business results.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, positive workplace cultures, just go search up culture stats, people who are listening, right? Or are on the fence about, should I be doing this? And you're going to see McKinsey, Deloitte. I mean, I've got piles of papers and studies that they have put out in the last year about positive workplace cultures are actually producing 4 to 5 times the S&P index average.
Right.
You can't explain it away anymore. Like, it is a direct correlation to your business being able to even thrive during a recession.
And it's retention. So many of our staff come to us and say, Tracy, we're having trouble retaining people. And my answer is, what does your culture look like? How are you supporting that? One of the recent Inc. articles, it was either 76 or 79% of individuals leave because they don't feel appreciated at work. That's culture.
Yes. And it's leadership, because leaders are too busy and no one has trained their leaders to what it actually, like, what are the leadership characteristics and the leadership values that we need to have. We just put leaders in a position because they're smart, and we don't ever give them the skills that they need in order to make people feel that way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It was an HBR article that stated, guess what? You get your first report at 26 and you don't get leadership training until 36.
But that's why, and I know you agree with this, is like emerging leader programs, bring people in who are individual contributors who you think could be future leaders at your organization. You're not promising them anything, but you're telling them you value them, right? And you want them to stay, and there's growth potential here. And then you're giving them the skills you need them to have to be able to build your business.
Yeah, for sure. We just finished, we call it our new hire mentor buddy training, right?
Yeah.
So, and we do a lot of work in the construction industry, as I know you do as well.
Yep.
And with that, it's 4 2-hour trainings. These are carpenters that have the potential to go into leadership roles, foreman, supervisor roles. They're not even eligible for that until they go through this program and spend at least 6 months supporting a new hire coming in. And the beauty of that is it has increased the retention of new hires, and it has also created the pathway for this. So those listening, there is a podcast that I did with Heather, and we'll link it in the show notes, from this company of why they did this and the impact it's had on their business, right? And so that's, I think that's one of those examples of, and I'm going to let you kind of, talk about this, but how to simplify culture and create actionable steps forward. And these are some of those actionable steps.
Right. It's not solving all of it, right? I think that's where the overwhelm, and to be honest, that's where the nebulous piece comes from, because it's much easier once we dig in to go like, oh, it's too big, right? It's too big. But if our sales numbers were at the point where our engagement or our retention numbers were, we sure as hell would be doing something.
Right.
So we have to look at it as that is just as big of an impact to our organization as our sales. It absolutely is in the end, because it's profitability, right? It's performance of the people that we've got today. And so when I say just like start the conversation, I mean, find a model, right? Find something that can guide, or find a guide like what you guys do. Just have a conversation as a leadership team. And then you're also going to have conversations throughout the organization, right? Our model, we will not do our process with any company that will not do a full survey. And it's a culture survey. It's not an engagement survey. It's totally different. There's room for both, but we do a culture survey because it's more about how tied into the soul, right? To belonging to the whole are they, versus what do they want, right? Which is more what an engagement survey is how they feel. It's more of how tied tightly are they. So we do a culture survey, but we also require focus groups. So we take a cross section of the organization. They don't get to tell us who we're meeting with. We decide, right? The carpenters all the way up to and we bring them into focus groups to have real conversations from their perspective. What's going on? What do they see And that is where the value is at, is creating the space for those conversations. And so companies can do that on their own, right? How do you do those, or bring in your team to help facilitate that if they don't want to facilitate it themselves? But I really think it starts with a conversation.
Absolutely. It starts with a conversation. And I think the other thing is it takes a skill set. So often we say, look, we're a knowledge transfer company. Let us do the first couple ones. If you feel like you can take it over,
right,
go for it. However, we are your partner to help you to be successful. And I want to see you successful. I don't care who does it necessarily, but I want to see you successful.
Right. And that's the kind of partner, I just want to put a plug in for your approach and your values, is you want the partner that is teaching you to fish, but is always going to be there to support you when you get to the next level and there's something new you don't know.
Right. Well, thank you, Jaime. I appreciate it. And I see that in so much of what you're doing too, which is why I'm so excited to have you on and share this today. One of the things you talk about is balancing the needs, business needs and human needs. And you've talked about this entire conversation, but is there anything else you want to share on that?
Yeah, it's a real issue right now, right? I don't believe employees or leaders come in every day like, oh, I'm going to stick it to them, or I don't want to, right? We all come in with really good intent. We're all coming from different places with different experiences. This was just our way. Because if you look at what we do, right, we could say we do strategy work, we do culture work, we do leadership work, blah, blah, blah. So do 100 other companies. And what we were trying to say is really what we do, it's not about services. It's about helping you balance the business needs, which is profitable growth, innovation, being able to manage through crisis, right? Like the strength of your business, products, services, all of that, balancing that with the human needs, creating a sense of belonging, really getting the max performance out of people. Where the stars align is in the middle of those two. I hate the word balance, but it truly is. It's never fully in balance, but it's choices that you have to make between the two of those. I was speaking at a conference this summer, 500 leaders in the room. And I asked them, I said, how many of you are hiring, right? Have open positions that you're hiring, right? Raise your hand. 100% of the people, right? Everyone's got a position at that point that they were trying to hire for in their organization. And I said, how many of you feel as though you are fully maximizing the talent and the people that you already have on your team? And not a single hand went up in the room. That's what we're talking about, is we're looking at labor numbers, and you guys see this, right? It doesn't look good. If we think it's hard now, the next 10 years is way worse. There won't be enough humans on the planet. The numbers just don't work out in terms of who's retiring and, the generations that'll be dying and the number of people that are able to come in and take their positions.
And the folks that are choosing not to engage in the labor market.
Which only made it worse. Right. So they're recalculating all of this right now, and it doesn't look great. But here's the deal. Instead of just focusing on something you feel like you don't control, focus on what you do control, which is getting the most out of the people. And you said it, people leave because they don't feel that they're valued. When people feel valued, it means you have strengths I don't have, and maybe I need you on this project over here that's not even in your part of the organization, because you can benefit the business and you're going to be in your passion area.
Right.
Most businesses don't even know how to do that kind of work. They don't know how to share their resources and put them in the right seats.
Absolutely. And that's where the gold is, right? That's where it gets really fun.
Yes.
So as we start to kind of land our plane here, what is a takeaway you have for executives listening in today?
You have to have the conversation, especially this time of year, right? You're setting budgets, you're figuring out your plan for 2023. There has to be something in your plan or incorporated into what else you're doing that is around people and that is around culture. And it has to be intentional.
Yes.
And it's got to be measurable. What are we going to do to move the needle? And then how are we going to measure ourselves against it? But we are at a time where it's no longer something, maybe that'd be nice to have. It's an absolute requirement. And I truly believe it'll be a competitive advantage.
Absolutely. And then when you look at this from the other lens, which is the human resources lens, right? What insight do you have for HR professionals listening in that are like, I talk to so many that just throw their hands up and they're like, I can't impact it. I'm like, hold on, that's a thought. You can change that. And yes, you can.
Right. So this is where HR, right? There's a lot of different variations of HR in organizations. If HR has a seat at the table, then they have to figure out how to use their voice. And some of it's statistics, right? They can reach out to you, or I can provide them 100 things that they can bring to say, this is the lay of the land right now. Here's the thing we're up against. If they don't have a seat at the table, I think you've got to find out where to use your power, because you have an influence somewhere.
Yes.
And don't get frustrated and give up. Keep going, right? Keep having the conversation, sharing the HBR articles, right? Or like something that you read, but you have to educate yourself so that you can really speak to it as intelligently as you and I do. The reason I can do that is because I read a lot about it, right? That natural curiosity. And so I think HR leaders, they need to take that power and read about it and really authentically share their concern, right? And sometimes bringing in a partner like you or I, even in those initial conversations, helps, because right or wrong, an outside person is going to have more credibility, right? Somebody that works with other businesses. It's not that the HR isn't capable, but sometimes we can help prop them up, right? For either behind the scenes, right? Or with them. And so I think it's also finding your partners.
I agree with that 100%. And I love that partnership, right? It's, you know, what we say to our HR folks all the time is, look, my job is to make you look amazing.
Right.
Because that's what I'm going to do behind the scene. And one of those key ways, and I think you said this, I'm just going to say it. I know you said this, I'm just going to say it a little bit differently, is for HR leaders, it's looking at this and saying, look, if you can get in the mindset of every business problem is a people problem, now all you need to do is listen into the problems your CEOs are talking about and find the people thread and start talking about the business problem in and through the lens of people of how you can solve that. Now you have a seat at the table, and it's that simple.
So spot on. And here's a trick for all of them is I want you to imagine a tree, and the tree is the big issue that the business is trying to solve. And then there's a trunk and there's roots.
Yep.
Every single one of those roots is a person or a process issue, right? A lack in knowledge or an actual people issue. If you can help the organization, instead of trying to solve way up here, which is where they get all spun up, if you can help them start to talk about, let's talk about this one root. It doesn't solve the whole thing. It just solves one part of it, but it feels actionable. And that is where HR actually can bring up all of the people, because we're getting all the way down to the root, not the things we feel, right? Or we see, it's what the actual problem is. And even visualizing that for a lot of our clients helps them go, nope, we're not at the root yet, right? This isn't the lowest common denominator. And that's how you get down to the people side and what we need to do to prop the people up.
That is amazing. I have never heard that analogy before. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So where can our listeners find you?
LinkedIn. So Jaime Taets. I have my own website just because of speaking and books and things that I've got. So JaimeTaets.com. And then Keystone, right, where the culture work happens and kind of the work that we do there helping organizations, is Keystone Group International. So you can find us on all the social media. We try to do a really good job of putting articles like what you and I are talking about, just really good content out there to help educate people. So always follow us and reach out if there's ever anything that we can, if there's any data or information we can give to help you make the case. And our model that I talked about is we give it away. So you don't have to work with us to be able to use it. You can download it off our website. You can have a conversation with your team, because we truly believe that that's how we make an impact, is by arming really great HR leaders and just executive leaders with the right information.
And that's what I love about you and the select partners that we work with and refer, is they have the same mindset of give first. And you know what, we're going to be the partner and walk you through it if you need it. But you know what, here's the information.
Yeah. And have a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for being with us this week. And we will chat again next week. And as you're reflecting on your year and planning for the next year, if you want to chat through any of that, be sure to join our HR office hours. And that link is also in the show notes. Have a great week.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.